The other basketball team in Los Angeles has lost. The Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic played really well in the first half. The Mavs handled the Clips from the first quarter on, and so we are now tied up 1-1 in that series. Worth paying attention to there to see exactly what will continue to transpire in that series. Meanwhile, the Celtics continued to roll. The 76ers look like they're done. The Jazz punched back and got an evening of their series against the Nuggets. That was what happened in the NBA last night. Obviously, tonight, the Trailblazers attempt to go up 2-0 on the Lakers, and the Milwaukee Bucks try to punch back against the Orlando Magic in their game. Meanwhile, the Thunder and the Rockets, the Heat and the Pacers, all of that ongoing in the NBA playoffs. But I am most fired up with the continued dumpster fire in the Big Ten. We finally got the Big Ten commissioner, Kevin Warren, to come out and speak. And what he said makes little to no attention. And I'm going to walk through exactly what he said and explain why it, to me, is utterly nonsensical trying to follow through with what the Big Ten is doing here. First of all, for those of you out there who are regular listeners to this program, it's worth mentioning that I have fought as hard as I possibly can, both publicly and privately, for college football to happen. I have had on this show publicly the governors of Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and the President of the United States all endorse college football happening. That is because I look at the data, and the data is clear, transparent, and plain as day. Kindergarten through all the way through grad school, people need to be physically present in school. And on top of that, sports should be taking place. My own kids are playing sports. They've been going to sports. Kids are in school, present in school today for the first time. March. I've got a kindergartner, I've got a fourth grader, and I've got a seventh grader. My kindergartner was in pre-K last year, third grade and sixth grade. Everything shut down in early March, and Monday will be the first day that all of my kids are able to be back physically present in school since March. I know that is not the case for a lot of you, depending on what part of the country you live in. You may not be able to have your kids physically present back in school, but that is what I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt should be occurring, okay? Now, on top of that, as we work through the ridiculousness that is the Big Ten, it makes no logical sense whatsoever for Big Ten schools to be opening back up their campuses to tens of thousands of students, for the dorms to be open, for the student cafeterias to be open, for intramural sports to be taking place, and for think about that for a minute, intramural sports, and as if that were not ridiculous enough, for athletes on Big Ten campuses to be able to work out and train, do everything basically except actually play their sports. And that is an opinion I have that is ridiculous, and that college football and other sports should be going on, that is shared by the parents from Nebraska, Iowa, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, all of those fan bases, but all those parents more importantly, and also shared by Justin Fields, who continues to argue that it's ridiculous that Ohio State is not going to be allowed to play, okay? So the Big Ten commissioner, Kevin Warren, finally came out with a statement yesterday afternoon, and that statement was nonsensical. First, he said they're not going to change their mind about canceling the fall college football season. And he said, we did have a vote about whether or not to cancel the college football season, but he said the vote would not be released publicly. So let me start here. This is unacceptable. 13 of the 14 Big Ten schools, every school in the Big Ten but Northwestern, is a public, state-funded institution. That means that on some level, taxpayers are paying the salaries of the presidents or chancellors of these universities. So the idea that they can cancel the Big Ten football season without these presidents and chancellors publicly letting you know what their vote is flagrantly unacceptable. It is not in any way acceptable. And I've been on this for weeks, but it's like I'm the only person who recognizes this in the media. And it boggles my mind that the number one thing you should request of public figures is transparency. That's why we have something called the Sunshine Law, which holds that you can't have elected officials have deliberations behind closed doors that are not then public to be able to be scrutinized. You should, as the president or chancellor of a public state institution who is deciding to cancel all fall sports, you should have to publicly make your voice heard and let everybody understand what your vote is. So simply saying we discussed it and a vote was taken, but it occurred privately and therefore we have no obligation to make that vote public is flat out unacceptable. It should not be allowed to have these presidents and chancellors vote without having to say what their vote is publicly. I'm not saying everybody should necessarily agree with me and say that college football should be being played this fall, but I do believe that this should be, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that vote must be taking place in public. On top of that, the logic and failure of basic rational analysis continues to blow my mind. In particular, Kevin Warren, the commissioner of the Big Ten, has a son who is playing college football this fall at Mississippi State. He was asked about that, and he said, as a family, we've had many difficult discussions regarding this issue. That's all he's saying? Your own son is playing college football this fall at Mississippi State. He is training right now for the start of the season in the SEC. And you are allowing, the SEC they are allowing all of their athletes to decide whether playing in the fall is the right or wrong decision for them. And yet, when you actually look at it, the Big Ten commissioner, Kevin Warren's son, has a right that everybody else in the Big Ten did not get. He can choose whether or not to play. Now, it's worth noting that Kevin Warren's son is over 18 years old and can make his own decisions about whether or not to play. But if Kevin Warren thinks it's unsafe for all of the sons and daughters of scholarship athletes in the Big Ten to play, how in the world can he allow in any way his own son to play publicly and not rip the decision? It's flagrantly hypocritical for the commissioner of the Big Ten to have his own son playing and not allow anybody else in the Big Ten to play. Finally, the Big Ten schools seem to be pushing forward, at least publicly, on a plan to start playing college football in January, in the middle of the winter, indoors. Let me ask you this. If it's not safe to play in October, November, and December outside, what makes it safe to play in January indoors? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills in that I am almost the only person in all of sports media who is pointing out this flagrant hypocrisy and the absurd lack of logic involved in all the decisions that the Big Ten is making. And frankly, I wonder on some level whether this is all just about politics, whether the presidents and chancellors of the universities hate Donald Trump so much that they are willing to throw away a season in the fall because they think that not playing college football will make Donald Trump look worse. And it makes me feel crazy to even think that that could be part of their analysis and part of their decision making. But I look at everything else that is involved in this decision, and none of it makes sense otherwise. If you claim to care about the health of your student athletes, but your own son is playing college football, that to me feels like a completely illegitimate argument. If you claim to care about the health of student athletes, but you are willing to play indoor college football in January, but you are not willing to play outdoor college football in October, November, or December, what remote logic exists for this? I don't understand any possibility for why this could remotely make sense. And so I keep racking my brain over what could really be going on here. By January, there's not going to be a vaccine that kids have gotten on college campuses. By January, whatever health conditions you were concerned about in August are going to be arguably worse because that's the middle of cold and flu season. Whatever concerns you have right now are likely to be worse in January. Not to mention that all of your best players are not going to play in a January football season because they're going to sit out and say, I'm getting ready for the NFL. Not to mention you aren't then able to compete for a national championship. You aren't then able to compete in any way to make the college football playoff. None of it makes sense. So I just keep coming back around to what could the logic be, and the only thing I can come up with is Trump derangement syndrome. These far left-wing presidents and chancellors whose votes are not being publicly cast, which is unacceptable to anyone who believes that taxpayers should be able to look at highly paid officials in their state and know what choices they are making. That these guys are so far left-wing that they have decided to shut down all sports because politically they think it makes Donald Trump look bad. That's really the only thing I can come up with. And we already know that football has become transparently political. If you live in a state with a Republican governor, there is a 25 out of 26 chance that you're going to be playing high school football this year. The only state with a Republican governor not playing high school football is Maryland. If you live in a state with a governor who is a Democrat, 15 out of 22 of those states, 2 still have to decide, are not going to be playing high school football. And the states that are in the Big Ten, they have a liberal, far left-wing presidents and chancellors. I got to tell you, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. Other than politics, that's the only thing that I can come to that makes sense for the Big Ten. And if you believe that politics is involved like this, how unfair is it to all the high school football players, all the high school athletes, and all the college athletes in the Big Ten that their seasons are being canceled, not because of health, not because of concerns related to whether the season can be completed safely, but just because some of these people hate Donald Trump and so are making irrational decisions. It blows my mind that this could be where we are, but I really think that's the only possible suggestion that makes any sense at all. And I feel like I'm crazy for pointing it out, but the fact that even the college football Corona Bro media is not pointing out how ridiculous it is that 13 out of 14 of these chancellors and presidents are taxpayer funded and they're not voting publicly, that the son of the Big Ten commissioner is playing college football this fall in the SEC, and that winter football in January is transparently ridiculous. It makes zero sense that anyone could be making all of these statements and that no one else is looking at them and saying, what in the world is going on here? I feel like the college football Corona Bro media is totally covering for the Big Ten, their commissioners, their presidents, and their chancellors. And I feel like I'm the only person with a national voice that is pointing out all this absurdity.